Welcome to Will's Box Song Pod, a show where we dig deep into the songs and artists that move us and how we're moved to craft the songs we write. I'm Tim Wilsbach, and I write, release, and perform music as Wilsbach, and you can find me anywhere you stream music. Let's dig in. Today's guest is a singer-songwriter from Los Angeles, California, who releases music with her band Bullyheart, 2014's Anti-Gravity, 2018's Queen Mab, and her most recent release, Land of the Living, released in 2023, which is a concept album filled with character studies around murder, victims, detectives, mediums. That record came with a companion limited series podcast of the same name, and in this world of so many true crime podcasts, I can't believe it wasn't huge. Seriously, check it out. It's so much fun. She writes and records cinematic, moody pop and rock music that would be at home on the radio in any number of recent decades. And in fact, her music has found its way into the soundtracks of a handful of television shows. We had a great chat on the phone last week, getting ready for our real conversation today. We talked about Naked Eyes, covering Burt Bacharach, how we both started out as actors, or wannabe actors in my case. And I'm very excited to continue and dig deeper into the details with this super creative human being. Please welcome to Will's Box Song Pod, Holly Long. Holly, how are you?
That's amazing. I'm wondering if I can hire you to write all my publicity.
I mean, they do say that you should have someone else write your bio, which I'm not sure I've ever put into practice. But
sure. Yeah, well, it turns out I'm in. I love it. Thank you. That was awesome.
You write and release music as Bullyheart.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that got started.
Well, I used to release music under my own name, under Holly Long, for the first decade of releasing music, which was 2000 through about 2010. The first 4 albums that I put out under my own name because I was a singer-songwriter, and I considered myself a singer-songwriter, and I put out. Each album sort of has a little bit of a different vibe to it. The first one is like late 90s, sort of Lilith Fair inspired, like Sarah McLachlan and Paula Cole and all that. And the Americana album. And then the fourth one under my name was like a 70s studio album, like soul, funk, pop, rock kind of thing. And I had this fabulous, like, decade-long arc of a singer-songwriter career. And then something happened in 2010 where I was like, I think I'm done. Not making music, but I'm like, there's like a chapter is over, when you can sort of organically feel that. I think I was just tired of feeling so uncool.
Yeah, right.
In a certain way, I was like, wouldn't it be so much cooler? I feel like I would get so much more props or something. I'd get so much more visibility. I'd have so much more opportunity to connecting with audience if I was in a band, or I joined a band, or I formed a band. So since no one was asking me to be in their band, I just continued to write songs. And then I sort of hired wholly different crews to produce and engineer and play with me, such that my music started to sound and feel much more like a new wave indie rock band. And so then I decided I'd go by a band name. And so now Bullyheart is my band name.
Gotcha.
The teenage desire to be cooler.
Yes, right.
Which like that never leaves.
Yeah, no, it never does. That's still what drives me to this day. And I probably have a handful of songs in me that I haven't gotten out yet about that very particular thing, that like constant need for acceptance and all that business.
I will say, though I was like in the arcing toward cooldom, the name Bullyheart is much more of a personal moniker having to do with a health issue I had in my 20s. It had made such an enormous impact on my life in positive and negative ways. And the bully part it's sort of an ambivalent word where it could also mean positive and negative things. Like having a heart that bullies you
Uh-huh.
is a burden. And then people over across the pond say things like, oh, it's so bully. It's so bully, meaning it's so great. It's so good. So I thought after like 8 months of trying to figure out what to call my band, and I'm online, like looking at all of these names, like, oh, what about this name? And everything is taken, of
Yeah,
course,
right.
that I wanted.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night, I just had this sort of inspiration to put these two words together and make it my name. And it was funny because even at the time I was like, this is a really good name for me because it's really appropriate. And I was like, it's not as cool as I want it to be, but this is my name. Like I knew it. I knew
Right.
it somewhere deep in my bones. I was like, this is the name of my band. And it's going to be cool when you embrace it. Like
Yeah.
that's all there is to it.
Yeah, it's a unique name. It's memorable. I think it works. And like you mentioned, you actually kind of bring this up on your podcast a little bit. Your health issues. You were actually in a coma for a minute.
I was for a couple of days. I was because my whole body was infected. I was undergoing sepsis because my heart was infected, and so all of my blood was infected. So I had a fever of around 106, almost 107. So yeah, I was really at death's door.
Yeah.
I was almost there.
And you were telling me last week it kind of changed the trajectory of your creative path, at least to some degree.
It did because at the time, so I came to LA. I'm originally from Evanston, which is just outside Chicago.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and yeah, a Midwestern girl, sort
Yeah.
of born and bred. But
I wonder. We didn't talk about this last week, but after we got off the phone, I'm like, I'm picking up a Midwestern vibe. So I grew up in Griffith, Indiana, which is right next to Gary,
oh
which
my
is
God, you
Chicago land.
less than an
Yeah.
hour away from me. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
where I grew
Yeah.
up.
Like
That's
my
amazing.
dad worked in the city, like all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I came to LA to go to school. I came to go to UCLA, and I graduated with a theater degree, and then had a great time in college. And I figured, oh, I'm not going to stick around this crazy place. I don't understand the city. It doesn't feel like home. But I'll just like dip my toes in. I was doing improv comedy. I was doing sketch. I was doing pilots, like comedy pilots and small indie films. And I was like, I'll just ride it out for a bit here. Maybe eventually I'll go back to Chicago to do theater, or I'll go to New York. And then that just never happened,
Right.
like
Yeah.
that was sort of a combination of my life. I started to lay roots down here, and I started to really get it here and really understand it. And I also met my boyfriend in my early 20s was a sound engineer. And so he brought me into the studio to make demos. Making music at that point was a hobby for me because, I was all about being an
Yeah.
actor and a working actor. And he was like, well, you've got these great songs and this great voice. Why don't we just lay them down? So I was doing both. And the heart infection sort of signaled to me once I got through the like whole month in the hospital, and then the few months after. It took me almost about a year plus to fully recover from my body, to really, really to bounce back from that massive infection. I realized that Hollywood was killing me. It's not that I didn't love acting. I didn't love the craft and the work of it, but I couldn't find a place there. And it just hurt too much.
Yeah.
So I turned to music because I was like, well, if I'm going to be broke, I might as well do something I love.
Yeah.
And something that I can take agency over a little more, something I can do. I don't have to wait for the phone to ring.
That's funny. You mentioned if I'm going to be broke, I'm going to do something I love. I had a similar thing. I kind of watched my dad. We were never, we were solidly lower middle class, but I saw my dad kind of coming home every day from work and being miserable. And I'm like, we're not rich. Like he's miserable. Like I'm going to do something I love.
Right.
And if I'm going to be broke, I might as well not be miserable.
Right. Find the joy somewhere. And I think that's why a lot of us artists allow ourselves to do our art. But yeah, I also feel like the flip side, sometimes that can drive people away from their art because you can take something that you love. Like for me, it sort of crushed my love for acting for quite some time because you can take something that gives you joy and drain it of all the joy, and then realize that like you got to pivot. I didn't find my way back to acting until about 6 or 7 years ago, where I decided to get back in because I was like, I miss it. I don't have the same need it doesn't have to pay my rent anymore.
Hmm.
I'm a whole different character. I'm a whole different, product from the marketplace point of view.
Right.
And so that's been fun to dip my toe back in.
Yeah, I was a working actor for exactly one summer after I graduated college.
Now you got to tell me
Um,
what happened.
yeah, yeah. So,
What'd you
well,
do?
I basically just did summer stock theater in Brown County, Indiana. So I technically got paid to act, but I mean, it was,
Well,
there
summer
are
stock,
no
I
there
mean,
are no
that's
small roles, only small actors, but it was a very small role.
really?
And then I ended up going to Indianapolis, and like you were mentioning, you kind of get stuck in the rhythm of a place and friends and social, and before I knew it, I lived in Indianapolis for a decade, and I'm like, what happened? Then I
Yeah.
came out here and blah
Were
blah
you
blah.
doing acting at that point, or did you
No, I went pretty quickly after that first summer. I think I always, like you, thought, well, I'm going to end up in Chicago. I love Chicago. I still to this day love the
Oh, me
city,
too. Me too.
um,
It's a glorious
and
place.
identify it with in a lot of ways. But I just never. What happened was I followed a girlfriend who had graduated before me, to Indianapolis, and a handful of people in my class went there too. So I was theater and drama and telecommunications. So I've been hedging my bets basically since
Right.
the beginning.
Right. You had that backup plan.
Yeah, exactly.
It's,
Which
it's
if I'm talking to anybody in their early 20s now, I'm like, don't have a backup plan. Like,
right. Right.
because if you have a backup plan, you're gonna fall. You probably, like me, you're gonna fall into it really quickly. And it's worked out. I've had a nice career until this year that has gone down the tubes. Hollywood will come back. I
Yeah,
just
no,
don't know
it's
when.
it's on the
Yeah,
way back. I don't
yeah.
know if did I tell you my husband is a TV showrunner, so
Uh
I've
huh.
sort of proximate. I've been proximate to Hollywood for a long time. He's a screenwriter. He's done films, mostly television though. And fun fact about my husband, he also followed his girlfriend who had graduated a year earlier
Yeah.
to college and was a theater major at U of
Oh, no
I.
way.
Yeah,
That's wild.
yeah, yeah.
That's wild. So, what I wanted to talk about on this podcast, though, and the central question that we try to ask essentially is, how do you write a song? So now that you've gotten through, you've found your creative path and you've made it
Yeah.
through, and you're focused on songs. What's your creative process? How do you write a song?
Songwriting for me is always like an evolving process. So at first, it came mostly from, I would say, writing poems and sitting down at the piano. The song starts on the instrument and
Uh-huh.
usually starts with me um, sort of screwing around with ideas. Like that's one way in, is that I'll sit down and I'll just screw around with some chord ideas. And sometimes I'll land on either I'll land on a hook or I'll land on a chord progression I like, or I'll land on just a piece of a song. And I'll go,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool. I want to remember that. So I'll either write it down or I'll record it quickly into my phone or something. Um, and I would say half of the time, those ideas become something eventually, whether they become something that week or that day or the next month, sometimes even years later. Although
Years. Yeah.
it's pretty immediate. Um, and then half of those ideas just go by the wayside and they never
Right.
really, get developed. Um, so I think primarily that's how I've been writing songs. I usually will come up with the melody after the chords, and then I'll play it for a while and try to figure out what does this song want to be
Yeah.
about. Like,
Right.
what's the voice of the song, right? What is the song trying to say? That to me is the easiest way in. But every once in a while, either I've been on assignment, like, oh, you need to write a song about this, or you need to write a song that sounds like it was made in this year. I don't do that very often, but every once in a while, I do write songs for reasons, and that's
Like
tricky.
like on assignment, as you just decide, I'm going to write a song about this thing, or what do
Well,
you mean?
sometimes it's my own. I put myself on the hook, and then I've also written songs. Like I wrote a song for my husband's play that opened last
Oh,
year,
gotcha.
and it needed to be about a particular thing, and it needed
Yeah.
to sound like it came from the '90s. Like
Yeah.
I've written songs specifically for other people's indie films a long time ago. Like, oh,
Hmm.
this needs to be a love song, but it can't say this, but it has to say this, but it needs to have, it's
Right.
like baking a cake, like one
Yeah.
has to have this kind of flavor and palette and this sort of energy to it. Um, again, I don't do that very often, but I have done that a couple times, and I find that that's not organic to me. I know people who do that, that's what they do,
Yeah.
and I think that's a super amazing skill. It doesn't come naturally to me. I'm much more
Yeah.
of the like just pull it from thin air,
Right.
kind of person. Um,
I think for me, the pull it from thin air, and it's not really thin air. It's the decades of life experience that
correct. Yes.
it's just kind of swimming, and
You
you just
channel it,
kind of
yeah,
grab
but
it.
it
But
is it does come from the 10,000 hours or whatever,
yeah,
right, that
right,
you've put in. But
yeah,
but yeah, sometimes you're like, "Yeah, I don't know where that came from. That's cool. I
right.
don't know where it came from." Yeah.
Yeah, but I also do like the deadline. Like I've done a couple different rounds of. I don't know if you've heard of this. You know, there's a guy I love called Bob Schneider. He's from Austin, Texas, and he's a songwriter. He does this thing called the game, where
Hmm.
he'll throw out a word or a phrase to a handful of songwriter buddies of his, and everybody in the group has to take that word or phrase or mood or whatever the constraint is, and you've got a week to write a song.
That's a super
Um,
cool idea.
yeah. So, and I've done that. I've done that a couple different times for my record that I released in 2019. Literally half the songs on that record came from something that I did. So
From that exercise.
they don't, like you're saying, they don't all turn out. Like sometimes it's too forced and it sounds like, what is this? What is this? I know. But other times it's a good combination, and it gives me the kind of the kick in the pants that I need to find whatever that is that's floating here from the 10,000 hours and go, oh, that, yes, okay, that works.
Right, and
So
then you're on right, and then you're on to something. Like,
yeah,
'cause yeah, I because there definitely is that moment where, like, I would say the last year of my life, roughly a year, has been pretty fallow because I sort of sat down and was like, "Oh." And,
yeah,
I haven't spent a lot of time in the music room, and the time that I have spent in this room here, I've mostly just been diddling, just trying to stay in relationship with my instrument and stay in
uh,
relationship with my voice. But again, I'm like, I'm not really channeling. I don't really need it. It doesn't have to come. I feel like that's finally starting to change. But you do help yourself by, like you took on someone else's rubric, or taking on an exercise like that is really cool. I also find co-writing is really awesome at
yeah,
times. The older I've gotten, the more I like co-writing with people who are less and less like me, like
yeah, oh
whose ways of writing, because then I stretch more and I learn more.
yeah, sure,
I almost always get something out of
yeah,
it, whether it's like a chord that I'd never played before,
uh-huh,
or like a
yeah,
way of playing my guitar, or a way of putting a melody line on top of a chord pattern, or whatever, just a different like vibe. It's all helpful at the
yeah.
end of the day, right?
So how do you get into that? Like I haven't done a ton of co-writing. I was one my first band was called Paging Raymond. We had two records, and we were basically myself and my good friend Aaron, and we both would bring our own songs to the band and work them up that way. And then we got together one time and tried to co-write a song together, and it was just this kind of like middling, mushy nothing. And I haven't done a ton of. There've been a couple other sessions, but I can't find my way into that for whatever reason, and I would like to. I just don't know how. So how do you find your way into that? Do you structure your sessions like?
Um, in the beginning of my career in the 90s, I actually had a lot more of a like an infrastructure behind
Yeah,
me. I met people through my boyfriend and his career, and I met people through doing a bunch of open mics and out here in LA, and then I started gigging, and so I had someone who was interested in signing me for a deal and publishing, and so they hooked me up with some people.
mm-hmm.
That, of course, the record deal never came to fruition. I've only made my
Right.
own records, but I got to meet some people that way. Also got to meet some people that I just went to this place called Highland Grounds long time ago, which no longer exists, sadly. But there was a great open mic, like a really high end open mic, every week, that I used to go and meet people and sort of, flirt artistically with people to try to, we were
Right.
all hungry to make it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
part of that is, yeah, it's just networking. So I did the best I could to try to find like-minded people and write songs. So in the beginning, it was easier that way. It just sort of came organically. And then as I've gotten older and even more DIY in terms of like, well, no, I do my thing with the people that I've met. I've had to actually really get more proactive about reaching out
Yeah.
to people and co-write. To be honest, it's been a while since I've taken on a new writing partner, and I'm actually
Yeah.
overdue for it because it could help me maybe like shake myself out of this
Yeah, for sure. Shake you out of a
like writer's block.
writer's block or whatever. So we talked a little bit about Land of the Living, which is your most recent release. Which what did I let's see, what did I write down here? The whole album is very dramatic. It's very, very cinematic and dramatic.
Thank you.
And here's a random thought I had. I would go see Land of the Living, the musical, is all I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
It's
First of all,
it's very, very story cinematic based. So
you don't even know what a huge compliment that is to me
yeah.
and my co-producer, Dan McMains, who you hear talking on my podcast, right? Because before we worked on that project, right before, it was like 2020, where things were shut down, and I was trying to figure out what to make after we had.
Oh, that's your COVID record.
Yeah, well, Land of the Living is my COVID record. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Totally.
Gotcha. Yeah.
He and I had released Queen Mab in 2018, which is all sort of thematically about like that teenage feeling. Hence, Queen Mab. Queen Mab is a reference to Mercutio's speech to Romeo in the beginning.
Right.
Right. And he talks about how Queen Mab hath been with you, meaning like, Romeo was all like smitten over Roxanne, this woman named Roxanne, before he fell in love with Juliet. And his friends were like hanging out with him in the square, making fun of him, like, you're so pussy whipped kind of thing. And Queen Mab was the fairy that everybody sort of attributed that energy to, right?
Like a Cupid.
Yes, basically. Like a trickster. Yeah, well, like Cupid, like a trickster Cupid too.
Yeah.
Like she's an interesting sprite.
The neon night is rich with stars. Let somebody show you who you are. She flickers in the thick of it. Someone's appearance from the blue pulls the reins right out from under you. See her shudder from the shine of him. To be wanted, 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 to be loved, to be wanted, 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 to be loved. It wears a velvet glove you cannot let go of. To be wanted, to be loved.
Right, so that was the Umbrella record that Dan and I put out in 2018, and then I was like, well, what am I doing now? And the two of us, because we come from where we come from, his musical background, my musical background as an actor, and I used to do a lot of musicals as a kid, and I loved musicals, and my parents loved listening to them, and so it was really they were in my ears early on.
Totally. Yeah.
We were like, let's write a musical.
Yeah.
We were going to write a rock opera, and I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to do
Love
this,
that.
because I've got sort of the story and the song in, those are my tools, and his tools are, he's got all the music theory and he can score, so we're like, we're going to write this musical. And then out of that, you think you're headed in one direction, and then something else happens. Right. And then out of that came this idea. All of a sudden I was like sitting around at like 4:00 in the afternoon because it's the pandemic. I have nothing to do. Like 4:00 in the afternoon, drinking rosé and like watching crime TV. Right.
Yeah.
All of us middle-aged white women. And, and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. What if? And then I started sort of writing these songs about murder and about, like my imagination took me there. And then the musical idea got kind of shelved for a bit. But we did end up creating songs, I think, in that cinematic vein, or in that musical storytelling vein, because that's what we initially had wanted to do together. So I'm so glad that you picked that up. That makes me
totally
feel like so heard. So awesome. Thank you.
If I were to want you gone, there'd be no mistakes. If I were to want you gone, no errand prints or telephone trails, no loose lip confessions in an overnight jail. If I were to want you gone.
Because I'm DIY and I'm paying for everything. A lot of it's on a shoestring budget, and I'm always pretty amazed at what we can come up with for as little as it eventually ends up costing, like in the grand scheme.
Yeah, for sure. I run into that too, the whole budget thing. Like, it's this push pull between, it's like we're not in our 20s anymore. I'm not trying to make it.
Right.
And in the same way that I was trying to make it in my 20s. I mean, I at this point, I'm just trying to fill a room occasionally.
Right. Me too, man. I mean, that's been like my whole 25 years I've been, and now I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm filling a room. I'm succeeding. 15, 20 years ago, I was like, oh, this got to get bigger. And now I'm like, wait, you know what? I'm actually kind of killing it.
Yeah. That's great.
But I mean, I hear you too. I always want to pay people what they're worth, which is really difficult when you just don't have. So you want to make it, you want to at least make it a project that they're going to want to work on. That's going to be fun for them, that they can feel, get them in and out real clean and easy. You just don't want to make it a hassle for anybody.
Yeah.
You're not paying them what they're worth.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did not do a great job of that in this last go around. I missed, you're talking about the collaboration that you have with the Dan and Charlie. What was the other guy?
Charlie. Yeah.
And that's so important. And this last record that I just put out, I'm proud of it and proud of the product. And I was able to, get a good amount of help from very talented friends. But I think reflecting, not a little too much of it was done in this room, sitting at this desk, looking at that screen, it's a little too insular. And I can already tell, I just put it out in June, but I'm already I'm ready for the next one. And I want to get in a studio and I want to spend some money,
right?
And bounce ideas. And I want more input from my creative friends instead of just hey, do this way and this way. So that collaboration is important.
Totally. I agree. And just to reflect back to you, first of all, I've listened to a bunch of it before I got on this podcast. And I think it sounds really, really good. I don't think it sounds like you did it right here in this room by yourself.
Oh, well,
it sounds a lot more expansive and professional to me. So kudos to you. I think it sounds great. I think it's a fantastic take on your own version of a pop indie rock. It's really cool.
Thanks.
Very you got some hooks. There's a lot of catchy stuff. I think it sounds great. Number one.
Yeah.
And number two, I only learn through doing and then making mistakes.
Right. Yeah.
You learn the most through making mistakes. And I look back on the whole trajectory of my recording life from, I started in 1999, really recording, other than the demos that I had been doing earlier. And I mean, I hear all the glaring errors, and
totally.
There's so many things I would redo. There's so many songs that I would maybe give another edit to. Oh, that song wasn't ready to record, or
absolutely,
or no, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have used that instrumentation. I wouldn't have arranged it that way. I wouldn't have had, I would have subbed out another song in the collection. I mean, there's so many mistakes to make.
Yeah.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's how you become who you are.
Yeah. Essentially, your albums or your singles or whatever you're recording, it ends up just being a snapshot of who you were as an artist and a songwriter and a performer at that time.
That's right. And what you knew, what you had access to, and where your creative juices were flowing. And, I mean, I think in a way it's also kind of it's a privilege and a burden to be DIY, because pretty much every decision that was made on my records was ultimately up to me. Like
Yeah.
I didn't have, record people breathing down my neck ever.
Yeah.
So that, I have to pat myself on the back, but then there's also no one else to blame when, when you look back and you're like,
Yeah.
well, that could have been better.
Yeah.
But you are where you are at every point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did dig into your little companion podcast that you did
Yeah.
after Land of the Living, and I haven't listened to all of it, but I've listened to a lot of it. So
Well, I really appreciate that. I mean,
yeah.
for a podcast of like a couple of musicians sitting around talking about making music, it feels kind of niche to me. So
Yeah.
I'm always super appreciative when people tell me, "Oh yeah, I listened to a couple episodes; it's really interesting." And I'm like, "Great, that's great."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely niche, but it's like so perfectly kind of my niche. I mean, the more of the digging in of the songs and the study behind it rather than the murder part, although that's intriguing too.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
sure, that that was part of the draw for me to create it. I mean, it was organically bubbling up in me anyway, but I thought, hey, people may actually dig this.
Yeah. So that's the most recent thing you put out into the world was that Land of the Living.
Land of the Living. Yeah. Did you see how hard it was for me I actually had trouble saying it a number of times. Yeah. It's one of those things that it does not trip off your tongue, but yes, that was the last piece of collective music that I've put out in the world. I'm working on a couple songs right now. I may put out a single next. We'll see. But yeah, I've really taken quite a breather in the last year, having to do with just my own personal life. And that was such a push. I put out that album and I put out the podcast and I put out an accompanying video that goes along to the first song, which is called Hangman. And that's all about the detective voice. And then I made quite a major push with that in terms of entering it in a bunch of festivals. And we actually won a couple of Best Video awards last year. So I felt like I had done my duty with the project and the concept. And then I just kind of sat down and took a breath. And I'm still rising up out of that breath.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah,
I bet. Yeah, I've seen the video too, and the video is also incredible and cinematic.
I turn my siren low. They've already taped it off. Flashing lights illuminate the scene from blue to red. I'm locked and loaded here. Packed away my fear. Though you never get used to it, you never get used to it. Never get used to it, you never get used to
it. You mentioned hooks too, and that's kind of one of the things that's stuck out to me from pretty much everything that I've heard of yours to this point is. And it's specifically highlighted when you're talking about a very specifically hyper-targeted themed record like you made, the murder record. You still did a really great job, I think, of the story basically exists for the most part in the verse lyric. And then you were able to craft it so that the hook, the chorus becomes a little more universal and it's not just this specific thing. And there's definitely a craft to that. There's a quote that I like to go back to a lot that I hopefully employ. The verses are the blues and the chorus is the gospel, right?
I like that. I like that. I think I've come this far to maybe never hear that until you just laid it on me.
But you did a great job specifically on that record of doing that. And I mean, obviously that's intentional, I'm assuming.
Oh, thank you. Well, yes and no. I mean, I would say also I got to add something about the bridge. I don't know that I can follow along that particular metaphorical path, but I can say that I use bridges a lot unless they're just musical. But if I have lyrics in a bridge, usually a bridge is like, okay, let me just tell you exactly what's going on.
Yeah, totally. That's
Right?
exactly how I use the bridge. Same way. Yeah.
Like in case you're a little bit confused,
Yeah.
listen to this. Like
Yeah.
here's what's happening. Yeah.
And bridges are a little out of favor these days too in
Yeah.
popular music.
Yeah, I have noticed. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff about popular music that there's a lot of it that I dig and a lot of it that I just don't get at all.
No, same. When I was toying with creating this podcast and I didn't have a name for it yet, one of the possible names was do we need a bridge? And it was kind of along those lines because
Take
like
me to
you,
the bridge.
yeah, I put a bridge in almost every song, almost just because this is how I write a song, first chorus, bridge, chorus, out, so it's like.
Yeah, and me too. And I do find that I lean back on that structure quite a bit, though I've been very I'm proud of myself to have broken out of that when I can break out of it.
Yeah.
Because some of my, I would say some of my strongest songs don't necessarily follow that format. We're like, oh, there's never a chorus. It's just an A section and a B section. Do you know what I mean? And I do hear a lot of that out in the world too.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that because we don't necessarily need to have so much structure to do the storytelling. I think, also moving from like a singer-songwriter into, trying to become this indie rock writer, it became really important to me that the song needed to sound cool, even more than the story needed to be perfectly laid out. Do you know what I mean?
Because the sounding cool part, how does that manifest for you? Is that more production or is that like literally the words that you're choosing?
It manifests in terms of the words, and it manifests in terms of the words that I choose and don't choose, because I think part of like some of my favorite songwriters, in different genres, I like all kinds of music, but I really appreciate, I just pick somebody like Tracy Chapman. She comes to mind. Less is more. She tells a story with such brevity. And I mean, that totally comes from like the folk blues, bucket, but what she's saying, exactly what she's saying, but there's just not a whole lot of syllables to get in the way of the vibe. And I feel like I would rather err on the side of somebody being like, wait, what is she saying exactly? As opposed to shoving too many words into a melody line, because, God forbid it would sound clunky and it doesn't sing well. You know what I mean? Right. When you're like, it just doesn't sound good. When I open up the parameters, I get more creative and I like what I write more and it sounds better to me.
You're saying with less restriction?
Yes. Well, with less restriction and more of a focus on it singing well, as opposed to the audience. Like the audience doesn't necessarily need to know exactly what I'm saying to me. I would rather have an evocative song, make somebody feel something, as opposed to like, oh, this is a story that they know exactly what happens with every.
Well, you hit on it. It's the make people feel something. So the specific words are less important if you are able to translate that emotion and have that effect on someone. Well, I mean, that's really kind of the whole. I think
the thing I'm trying to get toward the mastery is someone who chooses the right words. I think the word choice is really important, actually. But I think having too many words sometimes can get in the way of just letting the feeling shine through.
That's kind of the push-pull you're working through a lot of times, is finding that right balance. And
I mean, a good rule of thumb for me sometimes is like even though I don't sound like, nor do I want to sound like, say, the Stones, right? Love the Stones. Who doesn't love the Stones? I'm not trying to sound like them, but every once in a while, when I'm struggling with like, sometimes just go and listen to like a fucking rock and roll song. Like listen to Mick Jagger, listen to how much is said and not said, and then I'm like, then I can try and balance in my Tom York and my David Bowie and my Peter Gabriel. Like then I can start to bring in the poetry, but I need to make sure that there's like rock and roll there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and I have tons of songs on my Holly Long records. There's so many songs where I'm like, oh my God, so many words.
Yeah, too many words.
Singing so many words.
Yeah. I'll get that a lot when I come across a song that I've heard and I go, holy shit, that is the most simple way to
Right.
convey that emotion.
Right.
And it was the most efficient way to say it. And nothing was flowery. It's just there it was. And like, I will listen to a song like that sometimes. I'll be just, you know what? I'm out. I'm done. I can't do that. Like they can't possibly get any simpler than that. I listen to Dawes a lot, Taylor Goatsmith. He does that a lot. I found this song recently called it's called Universe by Annika Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those. It's just like the most gorgeous melody and just a simple observation of her little moment in time, figuring out how to capture that simplicity. And I've certainly gotten better at it over my 5 records that I put out. Getting to that point and getting to the gospel part of the chorus and
Right.
leaving and honing the blues part so that it's less and less. Here's all me spoon feeding you every little syllable and perfect little thing. No, leave some space. Leave some space for the listener.
That's right.
To bring their own,
yes, exactly.
story to
I
it.
feel like sometimes leave some space for ears, but also,
Yeah,
like
right.
you said, leave some space for people to infuse your song with what they think it's about.
Yeah.
Then your song becomes about not just what you wanted it to be about, but it becomes about what they think it's about.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because that's the whole point of connecting with art is
Yeah.
to reach someone else's life experience and touch upon that.
It's almost like handing them a coloring book, right? Here's the outline, but you fill it in with the color and the shading and you fill in the scene and whatever. You can kind of tell what the picture is, but you can make it as deep or as simple as you want it to be as a listener. And yeah, that's the trick, right?
I'd love to say that as I'm getting older, just like every song I write just gets better and better and better, but it doesn't work that way.
Right.
It doesn't work. So, sometimes you're like, you get closer to that moment and it feels really like, wow, when I feel like I've channeled something really good, I feel very humble. Like, wow, that was of me and not of me.
Yeah.
Then I'll just write a couple, 2 or 3, just other shitty things.
Yeah. Right.
Like,
Yeah.
oh man, I thought I had it. I had my handle. I had the butterfly right on my hand.
Yeah.
I'm clenching again. Yeah.
And I wanted to pet it and it flew away.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
It reminds me of, I've written a song or two, and I think it's the cheesiest thing I've ever written in my life.
Uh-huh.
And I'll play it for somebody, and it almost gets a more positive reaction than the stuff that I've written that I really think is profound and deep and is going to connect on some emotional levels.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. There is no uncool, by the way. Like, there's no bad. There's no like, oh, that's not okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Does this make any sense? I do feel like
it totally makes sense. I'm not sure I've gotten to your place yet. I'm still trying to chase cool to a degree, but like,
well, I mean, I'm always chasing cool, but I think I realized that I've just opened up the definition.
Yeah. I mean, maybe cool isn't the right word, but the next level, it's like whatever it is, it's just out of reach, right? Like I'm constantly like, I got it. No, it went, there, I keep, I don't know. There's just something, and which I guess is a good thing. You kind of want to continue to have that drive and push for the next level, but
totally. I mean, and it's all of the process.
Yeah.
Right. And
right.
I feel like maybe we also will cyclically go back into those spaces. I mean, I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that some master songwriter, some like Leonard Cohen, didn't know what he was doing all the time. Like, I can't imagine.
No, of course not. It's just a matter of output too, right? Leonard Cohen probably wrote at least a song a day, if not more. I've seen this Dolly Parton meme, I don't know how many hundreds of times, but Dolly Parton wrote, Jolene and the other song, the Bodyguard
Houston song.
Yeah, what's it called? Anyway, you know what it's called.
Yeah,
she wrote those 2 songs on the same day.
Day, apparently,
which is amazing. And completely amazing. What doesn't get said is during that part of her life, and she probably still, she's writing 3, 4, 5 songs a day. So like
maybe. But yes, I agree. I agree because the more you're greasing the wheels, the more likely, right? Okay, totally agree with you. First of all, I'm an artist. I'm not a content creator. I don't create content. I'm never going to. And this notion now, I see out in the like the Spotify world and the whole is pushing artists to create every day.
Oh yeah.
Because you have to create every day, otherwise you're not and you must create. And there's a part of me that's like, okay, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the best stuff just takes time. And yeah, maybe if you sit down and write every day, maybe you'll write a song every day. Maybe you won't.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because maybe in a month you'll actually write a good song.
Right.
Do you know? Like I just this notion of like the neurotic need to constantly output.
Yeah.
I think that works against really aligning with your own voice.
I think where we're at now, where there's constantly an algorithm that you have to feed with different stuff that isn't just you expressing emotionally in the craft that you know how, i.e. songwriting. I mean, hell, I'm doing it right now with this. This part of the reason of this podcast is like, hey, let's put more stuff out into the world. And
I love that.
And I enjoy it. And obviously these conversations I love to have these conversations, but
that's organically part of your process. You do that because that's your artist. It's what your artist wants to do, which is part of why it's so good.
Yeah.
It's part of why this podcast is really good. You know, if you were just doing this because you had an idea that maybe this was going to further your career, you know, it would not resonate. You know,
also, as long as you're being authentic, even with whatever you're putting out into the world. I mean,
right. That is the $10,000 word right there. That's true. Authentic.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you have some stuff on your Instagram that I've connected with. So you watch The Bear.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Which is fantastic. I just finished season 3. Like that first episode of season 3, how some network executive let that go to air with hardly any dialogue is fucking amazing to me.
I know. And
gorgeous. And someone was like shitting their pants when they got that first cut and they went, wait, where's all the dialogue? But it's such an amazing show. But anyway, you kind of, I don't know if you remember that. You know, you kind of did a little monologue to your thing, but
I completely remember that.
You wrote this: my intention to share, to connect in a world overrun by sparkly appearances of connectivity. It's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like it's that constant, like feed the algorithm and all the socials with all the stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm on the pursuit of less shiny, more mundane, real true. And that like, I thoroughly get that. And like, that's kind of where we're at. And that's the, you want to get to the authentic part, the emotional release part, the connecting with the person on the other side of the, Black Mirror. And not just
and that's an amazing
stuff out there. Yeah, so good.
Amazing show. You know, there are all sorts of wonderful things that we gain access to because of social media. You know, I'm not going to paint it all black, but I'm trying not to pretend. And I'm trying not to merchandise myself all the time. And I'm trying not to sell. And I'm trying, I don't.
It's such a fine line though, to be authentic and to not, merchandise yourself.
Yeah. Well, because you do want eyes, you do want to be seen because you connect. You want to connect.
I still want to fill the room. Yeah.
Yeah, truly. But I do find that my reason for that has changed. I want to fill the room because I want to connect. I don't want to fill the room because I want to feel important.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm not. And, and that's become more and more okay with me.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm so not important, but, maybe some of the stuff that I'm thinking and feeling that feels kind of universal, maybe that's important. So I can be somebody that tries to convey some truth because it's not mine. It doesn't belong to me,
Right.
Anyway, so thank you for mentioning that particular sort of video diary piece on Instagram that I do now and then. But of course, I put a filter over it just so everybody knows. Like, I do my best to be very authentic, but then I'm like, oh, my skin doesn't look so good. Hang on. Let me just make sure I look decent.
You still got to look good. I mean, I've got the ring light and a nice camera and, all of it,
Yeah. I don't want to look like a cartoon version of me, but yeah.
Right. No TikTok filter or anything with putting the artificial freckles on my
face.
That's
right. There's no like kitties like coming out of the back of my head.
Speaking of the TikTok, I don't know if you're on TikTok too, but
I'm not, but
don't because it's.
But I know, but like, I'm very aware of it, and
it's so addictive. It's like you just this all nonstop, and like even you think, oh, I'm just going to look at TikTok for 5 minutes, and then 30 minutes later, I'm
And
like,
you're
what
like,
am I
oh
doing?
shit. Yeah. It's just,
Why am I watching like traffic stops? People recite. I like the stuff that I will stop and watch. I'm like, what is this?
right.
It's the most bizarre look into your brain. I don't even know.
Yeah, no,
Probably
but I mean,
revealing too much
that's
about
the
myself.
deal.
But
Like, that's all of us. That's all our collective brain together. We're, you're not alone, man. You're just not.
Yeah.
I'm not a TikTok user, but I find myself doing that on Instagram. And then other people will send me videos that have come from TikTok.
Yeah. Right.
And they're very funny or whatever they are. And then I find myself, then I'll get hooked based off of that stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And then I also am like, wait, I'm watching traffic. Oh my God. Like,
I know, it's
throw the phone.
I was telling somebody, I still get the Sunday paper delivered
Me too.
as an actual paper.
Me too.
And I do it so that I know that
I'm high-fiving you.
Yeah, right.
Because you're like the only person I know besides me.
I need a weekly reminder to put your damn phone away and like have something tactile and like read something that wasn't specifically tailored to everything that you flick through.
That's right. It's not spoon-fed to you.
Yeah,
totally.
Right. I get to pick which article I'm going to watch and which one I'm going to skip and read, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you do with your eyes. I actually do the crossword too. So I like put pen to paper, like old people do. Like I have an old person calendar on my desk. So it's like if it's not on my old person like paper calendar, I probably won't show up to it.
No, I still take notes on like an actual notebook, which is nice. I like that tactile feeling of pencil and paper. I still do notes on iPad and whatnot too, but
anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, you as well.
I'll recommend everybody taking a listen to all your stuff, but specifically the Murder Records and that podcast. It's super fun to listen to.
Thank you so much. It's been my extreme pleasure. And even if we weren't like hawking some of my music, I would still love to just talk to you. So this has been really fun.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for listening to Willsbach's Song Pod. If you've made it this far, please rate, review, like, love, add, subscribe, do all the things on whatever app it is that you're hearing my voice. That lets the almighty algorithm know that interesting people like you like this show and will serve it up to other cool and interesting people. Willsbach's Song Pod is produced by Willsbach Entertainment, LLC. Mixed, mastered, and edited by me, Tim Willsbach. See you next time.